Hello everybody, welcome or welcome back to Tiny Tiger Collective. I'm Helena and I'm bringing to you today a continuation of a video from a couple of weeks ago when I swatched for you my entire collection of 19 fountain pen inks. And now I have the immense pleasure of swatching for you an incredibly generous collection of ink samples that my friend Alison of Little Coco Studio kindly sent me. In honor of Alison, I decided to bring a beverage and a snack. I'm drinking this wild sweet orange herbal tea from Tazo, which Alison has featured in one of her recent videos as one of her favorite teas. And the moment I saw it struck me with recognition because this was the brand of tea that they had in my hotel in Albuquerque when I went on my recent family vacation in April. Somehow, one of these exact tea bags ended up in my luggage. And as soon as I found this, I decided I was going to save it for a video. Also, in honor of Alison, I've got here my milk arrowroot biscuit, which she also featured in a recent video. So that will be my snack for a no doubt long swatching experience. That's so good. So please make yourself a beverage, grab a snack, and let's explore these ink samples together. So the tools that I'm using to do these swatches is first my dominant industry ink muddler, which I purchased from So&So, a local retailer here in Australia. And you would have seen me using this in my first ink swatching video a few weeks back. So I'm going to use the muddler end to do my swatches, and then I use the dip pen end in order to write down the brand and the name of the ink. In my last video, when I swatched my entire full bottle ink collection, you would have seen me use these swatch cards. This is dominant industry takasago paper, and it has a beautiful template where I can write the name of the ink, do a little chroma shading test using a paintbrush, doing a swatch in this teacup, and then also noting down what type of instrument I used to make that particular sample. So in my case, this is a glass dip pen. I also use these wearingeul ink drop cards. However, I gave it some thought and I decided that when it comes to ink samples, and these are indeed the very first ones I've ever received. I've never purchased ink samples before. I've only ever purchased full bottles. I don't want to use my swatch cards, not necessarily because it would go through my swatch cards very quickly, but I want to save my swatch cards for when I'm doing very serious comparisons between similar colors, shades, in order to choose the best ink for a journaling planning session. I don't want to end up with a big collection of samples and full bottles and not be able to tell them apart in my swatch cards, so that perhaps I get excited picking my favorite color only to then go through my entire collection and recall I don't own a full bottle and the swatch was from a sample that I may have long finished. So I'm going to pull out my swatching books, which you would have seen me set up in my previous video, but I didn't end up using these on camera. The books that I have set aside for ink swatching, first is the Hobonichi A5 notebook that came as a free gift with Hobonichi planner purchases for 2025. So I purchased an A5 techo and this was the one book that I received as part of my order. With the beautiful Tomoe River paper, I thought this little notebook is perfect to collect all my ink swatches, and I had pre-prepared these pages using the Little Teddy Studio by Tal, stamps, and Shachihata black ink. These swatches will be reserved for my full bottles. So for today's sample swatching session, I decided to flip to the back of the book where I counted around 30 pages. And these 30 pages in the back will be perfect for me to make smaller swatches while organizing my collection of samples in the back. With Tomoe River paper samples covered with this notebook, I also prepared one of my traveler's notebooks in the regular size in order to test my inks on cream-colored midori paper. I did a very similar thing where I had pre-prepared pages in the front in order to do swatches of my full bottles of inks, but I counted 10 pages in the back and drew a faint pencil guide in order to fit a few more sample swatches on this page. So a few weeks ago, Alison reached out to me and so kindly offered to share her collection of inks with me. She showed me a big list of her ink collection and asked me to take my pick. And it was very difficult because she has some incredible inks in her collection. But I managed to make a short list of 10 inks. And to my surprise, when I received her parcel from Canada, I realized that she had sent me not only the 10 ink samples I requested, but 10 more samples. That's more than my entire collection of inks. In addition to these very elegant tools, I'm also making do with a few things in my collection that I've borrowed from my son. So he has a set of silicone kitchenware, and this cute little silicone pot, which normally comes with this lid, is serving as my sample holder. I also took this little silicone salt shaker that I think might be really useful when I'm doing one ink sample at a time to stop it from tipping over and pouring its contents all over my writing desk. So we'll see how it works. I'm hoping that because it's silicone, it's going to provide just a little bit of grip. I also have his old bath toys, these plastic cups, in order to rinse my dip pen in between uses. And the way I clean my pens is with this little cloth, which is actually a bamboo reusable diaper insert. Don't worry, I never actually used this insert as one of his diapers, but when he was first born, I bought a set of reusable cloth nappies, and I never ended up using this particular cloth. So it's now been reappropriated as a ink cleaning cloth. So I think I'm going to start with the ink samples that I requested from Alison, the first 10 colors, and then we'll explore together the extra 10 that she decided to include. This first one is the atramentis document brown. Wow, this is such a wet writer. The only waterproof permanent ink that I've ever experimented with was when I purchased a full bottle of platinum carbon black. And unfortunately, I found that ink incredibly dry when I inked that up with my Pilot Vanishing Point. I haven't tried it in any other pen, so I can't be sure if it's a problem with the ink or a problem with a pen or simply the combination of those two. So I'm very curious to try other waterproof permanent inks. And so when I saw that Alison had a few de atramentis document inks, that was one that I requested in order to see how it might work in my pens. Let's stick with browns, shall we? This is Robert Oster Cafe Crema. Oh, I love that one. Look at the shading coming through. Okay, this one's Teranishi Guitar Opera Rose. I can't decide if I like this ink color or the ink name better. This is the dominant industry Wonder Pens collaboration, Ginger Chicken. Now this is a color I have admired for a very long time. This is the now discontinued Pilot Iroshizuku Inaho. Wow, I love olive greens, and this is every bit as beautiful as all the photographs and videos I've admired make this ink look. This is more precious than gold. I'm going to be very careful with this vial. I've always been very curious about this brand of inks. Ferris wheel press. I mean, is their packaging not the most beautiful thing you've ever seen? That said, I've heard very mixed reviews about Ferris wheel press. I've obviously seen people who absolutely adore the brand and the inks in their collection. But I've also heard people complain about their inks being either too dry to comfortably write with, or some people have complained that their inks can be too light. I can see as Peter Moss is drying down, it is becoming more muted, more faded, and I love it. This is Sailor Shikiori Tokiwa Matsu. I only own one Sailor Shikiori ink, Yozakura, which is a deep muted pink lilac, and it performs so well out of almost any of my pens. It is wet, it shades beautifully, and I was very eager after that to try other Sailor Shikiori inks. I requested this ink from Alison. Oh, I guess it wants to be inked over there, does it? I've already forgotten what color it is. Let me clean up the drop that's fallen on my desk. The left side hasn't quite dried down yet, so I'll try and do this one a bit carefully. This one is Sailor Ink Studio 573. I do wish this line of Ink Studio inks names would be easier to remember than a series of numbers. Wow, this is so stunning. This one's, of course, Pilot Iroshizuku Yamamoto. I cannot wait to see the sheen in this color come out as it dries down. Okay, there was one last color I had requested from Alison, and it's probably a color that I wouldn't have thought to choose on my own. But seeing that it was in her collection, I thought it was a wonderful chance to explore and play with a color that I would probably never think to buy on my own. Oh, look at that one. This is, for me, the color of spring. It's another pilot, Iroshizuku. Let me double check what it's called. Hana Ikada. What a magnificent collection of inks. I can now see why people buy and collect so many samples. It's such a accessible but also fun way to experience a wide variety of colors. And when you're not committing to a full bottle, I find it's also easier to push yourself out of your comfort zone and choose to play with samples that might be something that you take one glance at and think, oh, I would never use that. But then it will surprise and delight you, as Hana Ikada has for me. As some of these inks are drying down, and of course, there's a few that are still very, very wet, so let's see how they evolve. The one that jumps out at me as being particularly special is I can't help but fall head over heels for this red sheen in Sailor Shikiori's Toki Wamatsu. When I first inked it, it seemed like a very straightforward flat green that almost for a moment I thought to myself, why did I choose this one again? But as it dried down and that red sheen came out, it all came flooding back to me why I requested this particular sample. I also love shading inks, and I can see there are some stellar shaders in this collection. Robert Oster's Cafe Crema, Teranishi Guitar Opera Rose, Wonder Pens and Dominant Industries collaboration on Ginger Chicken, and Pilot Iroshizuku's Inaho. I mean, oh God, and even Peter Mon. I know I'm just naming every single ink, but they're so beautiful. They're really, really beautiful. Oh, I find these just breathtaking. My goodness, let's keep going. So, out of these sample vials, Alison included 5 extras that I have here. I'm so curious to see which ones she picked out for me. Wow, look at this one. I wonder if it's something of an Inaho dupe. Oh, I have to refresh my memory. I forgot what it's called again. Kobe 21 Taisanji Yellow. I have never tried Kobe 21 inks before, so I'm very, very excited to see how this ink might perform in a pen. I can already tell it's an incredible shader. If it's not an Inaho dupe, I actually think this could be a viable alternative to Giebin Ombre d'Ebimani, which is one of the most incredible shading amber inks that I actually recommended for Alison to ink up in her Pilot Custom 823, one of our mutual favorite pens. I love that one. That's so stunning. She also shared with me 3 Sailor Tea Time inks. So I've got here Moroccan Mint, Afternoon Tea, and Christmas Tea. I actually wonder now if Alison was so perceptive because as we were going back and forth about ink samples, I mentioned to her that I had just celebrated Mother's Day with my son making me scones with jam and cream, and how much he and I both love afternoon tea. That is such a beautiful, warm, orangey red. And I really have a soft spot for warm orangey reds, like the color of sunset or red earth, as we have here in Australia in the outback. I can tell this one's a great rider as well. Oh, this one's breathtaking as well. To me, it looks really similar to Dominant Industry Ginger Chicken. It's funny how they ended up being side by side in this swatch book. Oh, and now Moroccan mint tea looks so similar to Inaho. That's breathtaking. And the other extra that Alison shared with me, which I almost wonder if she read my mind, was one that I was tossing up between requesting and cafe crema. And I ended up going with cafe crema. But this is another Robert Oster. And this one is toffee. It seems like a richer, slightly more red brown, but it is so beautiful. It's just slightly cooler than cafe crema. So that's all the swatches from this little pot. But she shared with me 5 extra samples, which I'll bring. So the 5 extra ink samples that Alison shared with me are in these tiny little cute vials. And they're so small that some of these, I think, they're extremely long names, barely fit on the label. But I think she shared with me some really unique, potentially even rare or obscure inks in this little collection. So I'm so excited to have a play with this. I have no idea what to expect. And all but one of them I've never even heard of. All right, this one's fascinating. This is by Ancora, and I believe must be a series of inks that are based off birthstones and birth flowers. So this one is for May, and that is Emerald and Lily of the Valley. I can't say I know anyone actually born in May. Oh, nope. No, this is too small. It's going to fall over. Okay. Oh, and my muddler doesn't fit through, but there is a little bit of ink I can pick up along the edge. So no harm done. I don't know if it's meant to be that light or it's just because I couldn't pick up enough ink using my very fat muddler end. What a special ink this one is. The consistency of it actually reminds me quite a lot of Pilot Iroshizuku Hana Ikada. Now let's try the other birthstone, birth flower ink that Alison has shared. This one is for December and it's turquoise and poinsettia. I'm sorry, it might be poinsettia. I believe that's the so-called Christmas flower that's native to Central America, but it's not a flower we have here in Australia. We have a red flowering tree that's called poinciana, and I always get those two mixed up. Very interesting interpretation. It's certainly not the color of poinsettia, nor would I say it's the color of turquoise, which I typically associate with this kind of green-blue. And this is a ring that I got when I was in Albuquerque from a Navajo jeweler called Ruth Ann Begay. It's not to say it isn't very beautiful in its own right, and that red sheen and shading, just absolutely marvelous. And it looks like it's the first blue one out of that collection. So you can tell I didn't ask for many blues. Now this might be another blue. And what a blue this one is. My goodness. This is not an ink brand I've had much to do with. Kuratage Ink Cafe, if I'm reading the label correctly. I see 2 names, Meiji Color, which sounds like it might be a range or a collaborator, but I believe the name of the ink is Shinbashi Color. It seems to write really beautifully from this dip pen, which makes me think it's going to be a very well-performing ink. Look at this blue. Alison, thank you for sharing with me these blues. I realize I didn't ask for any, but you've given me 3 stunning blues to play with. This one is Ancora Fuji. I've saved what I think might be the most interesting ink for last. This is Stationery Store Kobayashi Original, and it's a scented ink in melon. I have never tried a scented ink before, but I've always been very curious. Oh, it's a very light, grassy spring green, not unlike Ancora's Emerald, Lily of the Valley. Ah, the scent of the ink is very, very faint. If you've ever been curious to try this ink, but you're worried it's going to be an overpowering candy-like melon, it's not like that at all. Even sniffing the vial, I found it's like a very faint whisper of a packet of melon gummies that you would get from Meiji. So these are the 20 ink samples that Alison from Little Coco Studio shared with me. I'm going to give these another 10-15 minutes for the recently inked ones to dry, and then we'll come back and we'll go through the sample one by one. All right, it's been around 10 minutes and it seems like all of my swatches have had a chance to dry down and settle. And I wanted to give you a closer look at what they look like. I am completely in awe of how beautiful each of these samples are. It seems like I did start with the most saturated ink, the atramentis document brown. To me, it almost looks like a deep wine color. It has a coolness to it that makes it look so fascinating and multi-layered. Robert Oster Cafe Crema has a really beautiful shading quality in the swatch itself. In the writing, it is a stunning yellowy brown that's so warm and inviting. Teranishi Guitar Opera Rose, to me, is a beautifully muted, more brown version of Gierban Rue d'Ancre, which I use every day. But I dare say I prefer the deeper qualities of Opera Rose more than Rue d'Ancre. The Wonder Pen's Dominant Industry collaboration on Ginger Chicken was every bit as delightful as I thought it would be. To me, it's the color of happiness. It's so stunningly vibrant with fascinating shading qualities. Pilot Uroshizuku Inaho is every bit as breathtaking as I knew that it would be. It has incredible shading in the swatch. In the writing itself, at least with the dip pen, it's a little bit lighter, leaning more towards yellow. But I do wish more than anything I had a full bottle of this to play with, because I can just imagine how stunning a journaling page would look using Inaho. Peter Moss might be my favorite green that I have ever tried. I've been looking for a muted soft green for so long, and for me it ticks all the boxes of the particular tone and warmth that I'm looking for in a green, while the swatch itself has such fascinating layers, as though you were being invited into a forest walk. Sailor Shikiori Tokiwamatsu is so close to the depth of Peter Moss, but the lightness of this green, particularly in the writing component, to me lacks the depth and the softness of Peter Moss. And yet it has the most fascinating red sheen in the swatches. So if I was using a pen that I knew would show off sheening qualities better, I would love to use Tokiwamatsu. Yamabudo is every bit as beautiful and fun and lively as I knew that it would be. It's this deep grape purple with lovely gold sheen. And it always reminds me of a friend of mine whose favorite colors are these exact tones. And every time I see Yamabudo, I think of her. I am not someone currently in my life that's using a lot of saturated inks, but I can see myself buying a bottle of Yamabudo for things like writing letters when I would like my writing to be as legible as possible, while giving just this really fun burst of energy through this ink. Hana Ikada is such a fascinating color to me. There's beautiful shading going on in the swatch, although in the writing itself, it does look a little bit less multi-dimensional, but it's a very straight, clear-cut, soft, Disney princess-like pink. The Kobayashi original melon, to me, sits so beautifully next to Hana Ikada. These two, for me, are like the colors that a 6-year-old might use in a beautiful rendering of spring. They're so vibrant, they're so bright, they're so happy. And there's the added bonus of that smelling oh so slightly like melon gummies. Back at the top, the ink that swatched itself was Sailor Ink Studio 573. I absolutely love this color, and indeed I can see that I've chosen quite a few colors that are very similar to each other in this rich orangey red, but there's just the slightest amount of gold green sheen in this ink that makes it so much more fascinating than a straightforward orange or a straightforward red. Kobe 21 Taisaji Yellow is one of the inks that I didn't choose for myself, but it is completely up my alley in terms of this rich, joyful amber that looks like the color of a warm hug. I think Alison really understood me and my preferences for my choices and picked something that was completely in line with my heart's desires. 3 tea time inks. These 3 are just breathtaking. Christmas tea is another very warm red with what looks like golden olive sheen. And it's not just for me the perfect Christmas colors, but it's just on its own a really wonderful ink. If I see this, it does feel like a gift. It feels like all the joy and all the cheer of Christmas. Afternoon tea is a little bit more muted. It has more coral, more orange tones, particularly in the writing samples. I can see this as a lovely everyday journaling ink. Moroccan mint tea. This is where I find the writing looks quite different from the swatch itself. So the swatch itself looks almost identical to Inaho. Maybe it has slightly more yellow, where Inaho is slightly more green. But the writing for me is much more of a muted yellow tone, and it actually tends to get quite light. I love this color as well. I can see myself buying full bottles of all 3 of these Sailor Tea Time inks. Robert Oster Toffee, I absolutely love this choice. To me, it's somewhere between the atramentis document brown and cafe crema. It's like maybe one step towards document brown from cafe crema. I love the richness of this color. The swatch has a fascinating shading going on, although I don't tend to see that in the writing itself. To me, the writing looks very similar to my bottle of Lidate. The Ancora Emerald Lily of the Valley, this one's fascinating to me as well. The swatch is quite light, although that could be because I couldn't quite get my ink muddler in deep enough into the small vials. and I didn't pick up enough ink, though the writing you can see is a little bit deeper. So where the swatch looks like it could be a very light ink, I do find it quite legible with its shading qualities in the actual writing portion itself. Ancora turquoise or poinsettia is a very unassuming blue. It looks like any kind of muted denim jean blue, but the shading as it starts coming out in the swatch and the writing offers so much more depth and intrigue. Kuratage Ink Cafe Shinbashi color. Wow, this is such a beautiful turquoise. To me, this is like a tropical island. It feels like summer. It feels like taking a dip through an oasis. It's so inviting, so richly jeweled. It is a mystical, magical color. Ancora Fuji, the more I look at this color, the more I like it. It's a deep, very, very muted blue, slightly leaning more towards purple than Ancora turquoise, but the deep red sheen on Fuji just takes it to a whole other level. Just like Tokiwa Matsu, I haven't been able to see much of the sheen through both the writing sample using my dip pen, and perhaps that might have something to do with midori paper. Perhaps the sheening would show up more on my tomoe river paper or my takasago paper. But if I knew that I had the right combination of pen and paper that would show off the sheening qualities of these two inks, I wouldn't hesitate to buy 2 full bottles and write to my heart's content. So thank you so much for joining me in this little inky play with these 20 generous samples that Alison from Little Coco Studio sent all the way from Canada. And thank you, Alison, for sharing these with me. I am so grateful for being a part of your community and getting to know you through YouTube over the last few years. I feel like you are such a perceptive person, and the 10 extra samples that you included with my parcel, I feel like show a really deep, empathetic understanding of who I am and the sort of inks that I love to use. In fact, some of the ones that you picked out for me, like the Sailor Tea Time inks, I think I like more than the ones that I requested from your collection. So I am so, so happy to have this opportunity to broaden my horizons with a much larger range of inks. I am wishing all of you a lovely week ahead, and I cannot wait to come to you next week with another video, which I think I'll talk about some of the things that I learned in my last 10 years playing with fountain pens and inks that I wish I knew as I was stepping into the hobby for the first time. Until then, wishing you a very lovely week ahead. Take good care. Bye bye.